Welcome back, viewers. You are with me, Surbhi Unyal, and we are doing a special lecture series under the symbolic expressions. In this series, we are doing an introduction to philosophy, which is for the beginners in philosophy. And in this lecture series, which is on the introduction to philosophy, we have started with Indian philosophy. And in the previous lectures, we have discussed the Sāṅkhya Philosophy and what is the epistemology and metaphysics of Sāṅkhya. In today's lecture, we will be elaborating on this concept further. To do so, we have with us Ms. Manisha, who is going to interpret our lectures in sign language. So let us first revise what we did in the previous lecture so that we can build upon our today's lecture. So Sāṅkhya philosophy is regarded as a dualistic realism. And if you remember from the last lecture, we discussed that it is a dualist because it holds the doctrine of two ultimate realities, that is Prakriti and Purush. So Sāṅkhya has basically said that the reality is twofold, or that ultimate reality is twofold, which consists of Prakriti and Purush. Here Purush stands for consciousness or soul, while Prakriti stands for nature or matter. Purush are many and conscious, but they are devoid of all qualities. They act as a silent spectators of Prakriti. Purush is the witness consciousness. It is absolute, independent, free, beyond perception, above any experience by mind or senses, and impossible to describe in words. These are some certain characteristics of Purush. We have discussed elaborately in our previous lectures how Sāṅkhya has described Purush and Prakriti, what are the various arguments given for the existence of Purush and Prakriti in Sāṅkhya philosophy. So that we are not going to discuss in our today's lecture. If you want to know about those things and those arguments, you can refer to our previous lectures. Now, since we have already discussed what is Purush, let us now discuss what is Prakriti. Prakriti is matter or nature. It is inactive, unconscious, and is a balance of three gunas, which is the qualities or innate tendencies. And those three gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. So, Prakriti, in contrast to Purush, is unconscious, it is inactive, and is the balance of the three gunas, which are the sattva, rajas, and tamas, and these three gunas have different qualities that they possess. It argues that self or the Purush and non-self, which is the Prakriti, they are radically different from each other, as like the subject and object. And they even argue that subject can never be the object. Similarly, an object can never be the subject. So, subject here is referred to Purush and object here is referred to Prakriti. And they are saying that these subject and object cannot be reversed, because a subject can never be an object and an object can never be a subject. So it holds that Prakriti is the ultimate or the first cause of all objects, including our mind, our body, and the sense organs. So if you look at Sāṅkhya metaphysics, it states that every effect must have a cause. Cause and effect are two inseparable components that stands for all sort of creation in this cosmos. So whatever is there in this cosmos, it necessarily has a cause. So everything is in this cause and effect relationship. And cause and effect are in fact inseparable components. Hence, all the objects of the world are bounded in the chain of cause and effect relation. And this cause and effect relationship proposed by Sāṅkhya is known as Satkaryavad, or the theory of causation, which states that effect pre-exists in the cause. So effect is already there in the cause. It's just a manifestation that takes place. Fine, and this theory which Sāṅkhya holds, this theory of causation is known as Satkaryavad. So based upon that, if we look at if this world is existing, that means it is an effect. And this effect, in order to be existing, needs a cause for its existence. Hence, Sāṅkhya, it has proposed that Prakriti is the ultimate cause of the universe. It is regarded as the first cause, and all effects of the universe are based upon it. Being the first element of the universe, Prakriti itself is uncaused, it is eternal, and it is all-pervading. This is a very important concept here, because if we are talking about the cause and effect relationship, and we are saying that the universe is a cause, and the universe is an effect, and the cause for this universe is the Prakriti, then what about Prakriti? And they are saying that this Prakriti itself is uncaused, and it is the first cause of the effects of this universe. So it is uncaused, eternal, and all-pervading. Purush, as discussed earlier, is the principle of pure consciousness. Purush is the self, it is the subject, it is knower. It can never be an object, since it is a subject and a knower. Purush is neither the body, nor the mind or the manas, neither ego ahankar, nor intellect buddhi. It is not a substance which has a quality of consciousness. In fact, it itself is pure consciousness. This again is very important. Why? Because we need to make this distinction between Purush and the mind or the ahankar and intellect. So mind, according to Sāṅkhya philosophy, is distinct from Purush, because mind, ahankar and intellect are, you can say, parts of Prakriti. So one needs to be clear that Purush is neither the body nor the mind, neither it is the ego, nor it is the intellect. In fact, it is itself consciousness, and it is not a substance which has a quality of consciousness. In fact, it is a pure consciousness in itself. So it is all-pervading, it is formless, and it is eternal. Now with this background and the previous lectures that we did on Sāṅkhya philosophy, which talks about the Satkaryavad theory, the arguments given in the favor of the existence for Prakriti as well as for the existence of Purush, we will now in this lecture be discussing evolution. That how does Sāṅkhya talk about the evolution of this world in relation to Purush and Prakriti? So it says that world and worldly objects, they are created because of the contact between Prakriti and the Purush. Prakriti alone can't create the world because it is material. In the same manner, the Purush can't create the world independently because he is inactive. Hence, the contact between Prakriti and Purush is necessary for the evolution to start, though they are possessing different and opposite natures. Therefore, for evolution to take place, Sāṅkhya is saying that both Purush and Prakriti must have a contact. Only then an evolution can take place. Because Prakriti alone, it cannot create the world since it is material. And in the similar manner, Purush can't create the world independently because it is inactive. Hence, there has to be a contact between the Prakriti and the Purush, which is necessary for this evolution to start. Now, how will this evolution take place? So, it is only when heterogeneous change takes place in the Rajas, and Rajas it vibrates and makes Sattva and Tamas vibrate, that the equilibrium is disturbed. So, it is considered that there is an equilibrium between these three gunas, the Sattva, Rajas and the Tamas. But when there is a heterogeneous change between various gunas, that is when it starts taking place. So, it is only with this heterogeneous change which takes place. And how does this happen? It happens when the Rajas it vibrates and makes Sattva and Tamas also vibrate. And when they vibrate, the equilibrium is disturbed and evolution takes place. So, Sattva, the principle of manifestation, and Rajas, the principle of activity, were formerly held in check with Tamas. The principle of non-manifestation and non-activity. But when Rajas, the principle of activity, it vibrates and makes the other two vibrate, the process of creation begins. Fine. So, earlier they were in the non-manifestation position or in non-activity state. But when this Rajas, which is the principle of activity, when it vibrates, it makes the other two also vibrate. And that's where the disturbance takes place. And this disturbance, in fact, lead to the creation. Now, it is asked whether this creation is the absolutely new creation or not. So, according to Sāṅkhya, the creation is not the new creation of the worldly objects, but only their manifestation. It is only making explicit of what was formerly implicit. So, now as the effect is produced, what was implicit now becomes explicit. So, it's just a manifestation rather than saying that it is a absolutely new creation. It is in fact a manifestation. Fine. So, there is a change from implicit to being explicit. So, evolution is regarded as cyclic and non-linear. There is no continuous process in one direction, but alternating periods of evolution and dissolution which is parallel in a cyclic order. Fine. So, this creation, one needs to be again very clear that this creation that we are talking about is just a manifestation. And again this idea was discussed in the previous lecture in the theory of causation, where we were discussing that whether the effect, it is absolutely a new production or whether it is just a manifestation. So, as per Sāṅkhya, it is a manifestation because earlier it was existing in the cause in an implicit manner, and now it has become explicit. So, it's just a manifestation, or you can say a modification in a more generalized manner, where the implicit is becoming explicit. And this evolution, they are saying, is a cyclic in nature, and it's not linear. So, being cyclic, it means implicit becoming explicit, and so on and so forth. So in that case it is cyclic and not a linear progression. Now evolution, it takes place for serving the purpose of Purush. So the question can be asked that why is this evolution taking place and what is the aim of this evolution? So it is said that the evolution, it takes place for serving the purpose of the Purush. Prakriti, the gunas, the senses, the mind, the ego, the intellect, the subtle body, all are constantly serving the end of the Purush. This end is either worldly experience, which is bhog, or liberation, which is apavarg. Fine, so the ultimate aim here of Prakriti, or the gunas which are part of the Prakriti, or the senses, the mind, the ego, intellect, all these things, their aim is to serve the ultimate end, which is to serve the Purush. Fine, and this serving the Purush could mean the worldly experience or the worldly, you can say, pleasure, so to say, which is bhog or enjoyment, or liberation, which is the ultimate realization of the joyful state, or which is the apavarg, or you can say liberation or moksha. So it could be both in the worldly life or in the transcendental sense. Now the question is, how does the evolution takes place? How does this evolution of relating the Purush and the Prakriti, how is this actually taking place? As just mentioned earlier, that when there is a heterogeneous motion that arises and the rajas, it disturbs the equilibrium of the gunas, that's when the evolution takes place. Right? So there is an equilibrium, and this equilibrium is disturbed when the rajas vibrates, and by the vibration of the rajas, the other gunas like sattva and tamas, they also vibrate, and it creates a disturbance in the equilibrium. But how is this equilibrium then disturbed? So they are saying, Sāṅkhya says that the disturbance of equilibrium of gunas which start evolution is made possible by the contact of Purush and the Prakriti. So if there is no contact, this equilibrium won't be disturbed. So this, in order for it to get disturbed, there has to be a contact between the Purush and the Prakriti. Only then this equilibrium will be disturbed, and that's when evolution will takes place. So Purush without Prakriti, they say, is lame, and Prakriti without Purush is blind. This is a very famous saying in order to describe how there is a contact between Purush and Prakriti, which in fact leads to this creation or evolution. And to describe that, they say that they cannot, so to say, exist alone, because in that case, evolution won't take place. So Purush without Prakriti is lame, and Prakriti without Purush is blind, because then it would not be able to serve its purpose. So if Prakriti and Purush remain separate, then there is dissolution. So for creation, they must unite, they must come in contact. If they don't come in contact, there will be dissolution. So the evolution or the creation to take place, they must necessarily unite or come into a contact. And again, this has been described by taking an example that just as a lame man and a blind man can cooperate, and the lame man sit on the shoulder of the blind man and point to him the way, while the blind man may walk. And thus both can reach the destination, though neither of them could have done that separately. So what's happening here is they are saying that if a lame man and blind man, they have to reach a destination, they wouldn't be able to do that alone with their limitations. So in order for them to reach a destination, if they both come together, if they both unite, they will be efficiently be able to reach to their destination. So in this case, the lame man would sit on the shoulder of blind man and keep showing him the path or telling him the path, that where he has to take a right or a left or where he has to be cautious. So he is telling him how to move forward. And since he cannot move, he is sitting on the shoulder of the blind man, and this blind man is the one who is walking. So he is helping him to move, and the other one is helping him to tell the path by telling him which way to go. And in this unity, or in this you can say partnership, they are able to reach their destination, though neither of them could have done that separately. So it's very important for them to be together, or there has to be a contact. So similarly, in this case, if we try to look at that example in this context, we can say that inactive Purush and non-intelligent Prakriti cooperate to serve the end, and this union disturbs the equilibrium of the gunas and leads to the evolution to take place. So for the evolution to take place, they have to come together and unite, just like how a lame man and a blind man, they united for them to be able to reach to the destination. So in the similar manner, there has to be this unity for Purush and Prakriti for the evolution to take place. We will continue this lecture in the next section, and we will see that how this evolution, or how is this contact actually possible, this contact between two things which are absolutely different from each other. How is then Sāṅkhya talking about their contact, and what are the various types of evolutes, and how it is talking about the idea of liberation. That we will do in the next lecture. So please stay with us to follow up for the upcoming discussions. Thank you.